need to remember to tell
Okay.
Angus to do that.
Sorry about that.
All
So
done.
that is all for just between us.
And
Yes,
Angus,
we've just had the secret part of the meetup, so we
yeah,
now
don't tell anyone.
So
Angus, I might get you to stop sharing your screen as well, so people on a single screen
I
can see
will for
Carrie a bit
that.
better.
Yes, thanks, Lorian.
Sorry to
No,
interrupt.
that's all right. I am going to reshare in a second, but that's good. So just to repeat my question for the recording. So Carrie's been talking about the fact that she's working with small to medium companies, and also the fact that one of the things she's been helping with them is preparing their content for AI. My question was, does the fact that we're thinking about AI and large language models kind of consuming our content, does that actually level the playing field to some extent? Because we're, what's important has become the fundamental structure of our content, maybe even more so than any particular sort of technical implementation. So yeah, just Carrie, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I'm not sure that is true. Because if you have all your content unstructured and stored as a bunch of web pages, that's not really friendly to the computers that need to retrieve it, to retrieve the right information, reason with it, and then provide a response. I can say that today. Next month, that might not be true. I don't know. Like the way we're going there, the models are getting better, but it's still garbage in, garbage out. Yeah. So if you don't have the content people need written well, not duplicated, not up to date, like it doesn't, it's still going to be crap. Whatever is happening. So even if we're not using it to generate content per se, we're using it to generate answers, or to help people through a process, which is a form of answers. We need to have the information that will lend itself to doing that. What I would love to see is for this to make us all have less content. I mean, we as content professionals all know more content is not the right answer to almost any question. Old content, redundant content, out of date content has always gotten in the way of the content people need through search engines, through search on websites. And now when you get one, you're not getting a list of options anymore. You're getting an answer. And if all that stuff is still true, you get wrong answers. And people don't know it's wrong because it's delivered very authoritatively. It sounds true. And only some people will go back and try to find if that is true. An example, super simple example that my client said that they discovered, and I discovered myself when I was researching a company. Who is the CEO? Wrong answer, delivered authoritatively, because the first answer it found was from a press release or something on the website from 10 years ago. And now there's been 2 different CEOs since then. And the LLM doesn't know that. It just picked the first thing it found. It doesn't go in order, it doesn't go in chronological order. It just goes to the first thing it finds, match CEO, company, and name. Boom, that's it. So, and then that's, if it can't get that right, because there's too much, and it's because there's too much content. Like I've been making the case for getting rid of press releases on websites for a long time. Here's one. Here's another reason.
I feel like we've been fighting, those of us in our industry have been fighting against slop from way back when slop was being created by humans. So, and I think part of what you experienced, and I've certainly experienced myself, is that sort of initial negative reaction to to these tools is precisely about that. It's like, are you telling me it's going to be easy for me to write 100 blog posts in 5 minutes? Well, I actually don't want people to be able to do that. Yeah, let's the last thing we need is actually more stuff in the world. So, yeah, but I think another implication of what you've been saying is that content governance, which might have seemed like a luxury 5 years ago, it might have seemed like, look, it's just some due diligence you should do to keep your website nice and tidy. It's now become absolutely vital and a huge risk for organisations. And we see the same. We have organisations come to us because they're being pulled up by government regulators because of inconsistent content on their website. And one of the possibilities is that the government regulators are actually using AI tools to scrape the websites and find these inconsistencies. So AI is kind of getting them from the other end. So so it's really brought content governance into the conversation in a really critical way as well. Fantastic. Well, thanks, Carrie. I'm just going to share a LinkedIn post that you put up the other day, a few days ago. That's sort of generated a lot of interest and a few really good comments. And I might just ask you I'll sort of read out the post, but then I'll ask you to sort of speak to it a little bit, and also bring in some of the other people here and get some other perspectives. So I'm just going to share my screen again quickly, and I'll just read through this post, but I'll also paste a link to it in the chat. So that's Carrie's post, and here is a link coming up. So you can see that in the chat. I'm just going to read this out for anyone who hasn't come across it. It seems that in 2026, the best way to sell actual content strategy is to call it something else. Back in 2009, when content strategy was generally accepted to be an integrated approach to planning, creating, and managing content, I had high hopes. As a systems thinker and dot connector, I was all over this new term to use to explain what I did. But it didn't take long. We're all familiar with the story. I think it didn't take long before content strategy was turned into a set of tactics, many of which were really content marketing tactics, which don't consider all the content across an organisation. In 2012, we got content design, which I thought was a great term to talk about the work in the interface. Having a good content strategy would lead to good content design. And yet here we are with content strategy meaning whatever someone wants it to mean, and it rarely means an integrated approach to planning, creating and managing content. A content strategist is usually a mid-level individual contributor doing important but not strategic work. But content strategy is just what is needed for AI to work the way people expect it to be useful. If you aren't looking at content across your organisation and considering it holistically, AI is going to have problems. Since AI is the overarching lens through which we are viewing so much of our work these days, what can we call this old but subverted field? AI strategy isn't appropriate. I think content needs to be absent from whatever we call it. Anything you want to expand on there, Carrie, or what are some sort of real life, I guess, experiences that have led you to that kind of conclusion?
Well, all kinds of them. So this came out of this client engagement where we're recommending that they hire a content strategist. Well, they already have content strategists in their organization who are mid-level ICs, who one is, I think, in marketing, one is in customer experience. It's not to take away from the work that they're doing, but we couldn't call it content strategist because people in that company already think of that as a certain job, and it's not the one we were talking about. It needs to be, so we ended up calling it Director of Customer Experience Content Operations because it needs to be at that leadership level. This is not someone doing the work. This is someone coordinating the work, working cross-functionally, and putting the governance in place, putting metrics in place, doing the planning and management and planning for the creation of an update of content. So, it just kind of came. It was just another time where I kind of spiraled through this. I think last year I posted I had something similar, like, what can I call myself? I can't call myself a content strategist and then also do the work I want to do. Not because I'm using the wrong term, but because this word has been subverted. And I mean, as a case in point, there's, if anybody has ever heard of or watched the show Hacks, it's a comedy on, I think, HBO Max with Gene Smart. And at some point they go to this co-working space and there's a person on there who's the content strategist and he's like the social media guy. So like this term people know it. It's made its way into a comedy show, but it's not what I do. So how do I call myself that? Also, executives don't care about the content. They don't see it as a strategic asset the way we see it as a strategic asset. So how do we get people to let us do this work that needs to be done? So that's where this is coming from. I've felt frustrated by this for probably over 10 years. And, like I said in this post, like I was like, oh, yay, a term for what I do. And I wasn't even, as big picture thinking as I am now, because that was 15 years ago. I've, my career has advanced since then. My way of thinking has changed. So, I see someone, Holly, put in here about information architect. That is something interesting. Just this weekend, I'm in a new town, so I was meeting new people. And of course, inevitably it comes up like, well, what kind of work do you do? And actually, I had been talking about going to the information architecture conference next month. And they're like, oh, information architecture, what is that? And I said, well, what do you think it is based on those words? And he said back to me exactly what information architecture is. So I think that is a potential because it hasn't made its way into the lexicon of something else. We are dealing with everyone knows what architecture is. Everyone knows what information is. So they can kind of they might not have heard the term, but they can kind of go, oh, that's a thing. But that's still, to me, an individual contributor role. It's part of a bigger team. And what I'm talking about is a leadership role. I mean, strategy, I think somewhere else, I was like, nobody mixes up a product designer and a project strategist. Like those aren't the same jobs. A business analyst isn't a business strategist. So how did this term get put? This strategy is at the leadership level. So how do we elevate content to that? The same way, we have CIOs. They're clearly not dealing with our content unless they're managing a content management system, which may or may not be managing content. It may just be managing web pages, which is a form of content, but not all content.
And someone in the chat, Lorraine in the chat, has certainly suggested chief content officer as a position. And I think I've come across organisations with a chief content officer. Unfortunately, a little bit like what's happened to content strategy. In my experience, that tends to be chief content marketing officer, really, rather than someone who has a strategic overview of the organisation's entire content. Yeah.
Or it's in a media company.
Yeah, so content is their actual business. Yeah.
Right. Netflix, all these streaming services, all the broadcast services do have chief content officers because, of course, that's what they've always done is content. It's just still not the same as what we all do, although some people may work for those companies. The content is the bigger thing. It's the film, it's the TV show, and all the things surrounding that.
Yeah.
Director of information experience. That's an interesting one.
Yeah. I mean, information's an interesting word, isn't it? Because it's not, it's not degraded in the same way that content is. So people, a lot of people associate content with slop or with content that is, purely commercial. That's it doesn't have any real merit to it. Yeah, absolutely.
Influencers make content.
Creators. Information is something that inherently sounds like it should be useful, but then again, of course, information architecture is a discipline with its own history and its own practitioners. Many of whom don't really see themselves as content, as part of the content community. So, or they obviously the two things are related, but yeah, there is. It's not like information architecture is just kind of available for us to kind of take over. There's but the idea of this kind of second coming of information architecture and given AI is a really interesting one, I think. I'd love to have some people put your hand up and share your own experiences. Maybe people who have gone through some of the struggles that Carrie's talking about in their own organisation. So being positioned as a content strategist, but not being able to do that really strategic work. In the meantime, I've just shared the results of our poll, which is really interesting. I think we have the vast majority of people still thinking of themselves as a content something or another, and mostly content strategist, content designer, or both. We have some people who are calling themselves something else to do with content, and I think we've seen some examples in the chat like content architect. I know content engineer is another one that some people on the more technical side use. There's content AI specialist, things like that. But really not a lot of people at the moment are exploring the idea of thinking of themselves as something that doesn't involve the word content. So this conversation might kind of spur some interesting thoughts for people. But again, the invitation's there to put your hand up and contribute out loud. But in the meantime, I'll just read out a couple of what I think are really interesting comments. One from Lee. I'm finding that there's more structural thinking going on in information management or knowledge management and technical writing now. And I actually have noticed that myself. So there's and I can't remember his name. It'll come back to me, but there's a fantastic newsletter that's put out by someone in technical writing, which is
Scott Abel.
Scott Abel is exactly who I'm thinking about. Yeah, the Content Wrangler, which is all about thinking about ontologies and creating these systems of meaning that are going to sort of help LLMs understand our content. So that's even if you're not a technical writer, that's an absolutely fantastic newsletter to subscribe to, and definitely in knowledge management as well. I guess knowledge managements are already in a way used to the idea of decoupling the knowledge itself from the systems that it's stored in, so they're almost more ready to have to sort of make that leap than maybe some of us content people who've been stuck in this, often reluctantly stuck in this model of, are we just creating new web pages for our client for their website? So yeah, Lee, you've got your hand up. Did you want to say a bit more? You'll need to unmute yourself.
Select a microphone. I'll come back.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can? Okay.
We can, sorry. Yes.
I'm an unfamiliar Zoom user at the moment.
No,
sorry.
All good.
Just that crossover into knowledge management is something that I've really started to try and befriend the information/knowledge management people. And I work in a large government organisation in New Zealand, and I hadn't really come across knowledge management. Information management, yes, but not so much knowledge management. And just, most organisations have these knowledge bases that, as you say, are fairly organised, and they are kind of better at metadata generally, but they are trying to upskill at the moment in terms of like the user experience side of things, because obviously if their customers are internal, they don't care quite so much. And they have exactly the same problems in terms of, way too much content and no structure. So I just find that whole industry, because here at least it is an industry that I'm learning more about, are better positioned to be thinking really structurally. But there's still a real disconnect between internal and external and the kinds of things that are important.
Which is strange, isn't it? So knowledge management, it seems like it should be this big meta field that kind of really encompasses everything, but often it just becomes, this is just the internal knowledge that is used. It's either on the intranet, or it's used by the call center staff, or it's in some way kind of siloed into its own little area. And the opportunities to make connections between that and the more public knowledge, or even internal knowledge as a whole of organisation kind of thing, are not really taken. Carrie, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's the same. It's just that. It's the silos, right? Like silos aren't bad because they allow people to specialize, and we need experts in each field, but they need to be connected. And that's another thing AI is exposing, that they're all disjointed and working sometimes in opposition to each other. I mean, anyone who's worked in any business with more than one department or organization with more than one department knows that frequently these departments are competing with each other for audience attention, for budget, for internal attention, and we need to find ways. I mean, this is one of the things I think Jeff Eaton, back when we were all on Twitter, said, like, what if content modeling were just the friends we made along the way? That's, to me, one of the biggest benefits of doing an enterprise semantic content model is you have to get everybody together to agree on what it is the content is before we talk about websites, what goes on the homepage, everything else. And that alignment, and sometimes we have to agree to disagree, but that alignment does so much for the organization and the teams and the people working with it, because now they're not fighting about what's on the website. They're in agreement that, yes, we have all these types of content and we all use it in different ways.
So one of the terms that's been floating around, and I know this is a favourite one of Holly, who spoke at our meetup last year, is the idea of content as infrastructure. That content is, and I know we've talked about in the past, we've talked a lot about content as an asset of the organisation. For me, that's always something that's not always cut through to the people who really need to hear it. But the idea of content as infrastructure, as kind of business critical infrastructure, seems to be a good way of starting that conversation. And in a related way, there was a good comment from Jen. Once you start talking about content and information as data, especially in regard to structured content that has unrealized value, leadership starts listening, in my experience. Great comment there from Jen. Larry has a hand up.
Yeah, Carrie, when you were talking a minute ago, you reminded me the way you were talking about the semantic meaning of your content. I'm curious. I've been in the knowledge graph world for a few years now, and there's a concept in the enterprise kind of understanding of the semantic layer, or a domain model, or world models, as Jan LeCun might call it. I'm curious if anybody's, like Carrie, in your experience, or others on the call, if you've had any experience with attempts to understand content at an enterprise level. This kind of goes to what you were just saying, Angus, too. I think the content as infrastructure, I think that's a discovery process, not a creation process. We're already the infrastructure. We just have to re-articulate ourselves, I think. But Carrie, you were just talking about the concept. I wonder if we just talk about it differently in the content world.
Yeah, I think it's not talked enough about in the content world. In designing connected content, our foundational, most stable layer is the domain model. But honestly, I don't do that very often in my engagements. I often start with a content model because that domain model is just one layer of abstraction too far for a lot of organizations. Even though, again, it's how when they do it, it does change their mind. And I think it's easier to do for a smaller organization, but it's probably already being done, but called something else at the enterprise level, because it is part of the semantic layer that exists, at least in some departments. So yeah, I'm interested to hear what other people might have experienced.
There's another term that sometimes floats around, like metadata strategist, which is kind of vague but pretty specific too. I don't know if that's how people think about it.
Thanks, Larry. I'm just going to do a mea culpa. I attributed the phrase content as infrastructure to someone called Holly. It was actually Ruth Hendry. I just blanked on the name. So she gave us a fabulous talk last year on getting content AI ready, which is still up on our YouTube page if you'd like to go and have a look at that. A good companion to today's conversation.
I think Ruth might be here, actually, if she wants to.
Are you here, Ruth? Oh, yes, she is here. Hi, Ruth. Sorry, I took your name in vain there. So I just want to pivot the conversation a little bit, because one of the things that is a bit of an elephant in the room in all these content conversations at the moment is the external, is the world that we're living in, and in particular the fact that a lot of our friends in content roles have been subject to layoffs in the last year or two, particularly I think it started in the US, but it's definitely got to Australia as well. So we had a very well-known tech company in Australia lay off 10% of its staff last week. So we're all feeling it, and even those of us who still have our jobs are perhaps feeling more precarious than we were. Largely related to AI and the perception, whether it's true or not, that AI is going to require less of us. So, Carrie, without asking you for a magic piece of advice, because I think there's enough advice out there, and a lot of it is fairly glib. Are there any strategies that you're using to just sort of cope with this current situation? And especially for those in the US, I do also want to acknowledge that on the top of that, you're also dealing with the second Trump administration and everything that's going on with ICE and everything else that's going on in the world, which I won't list. So yeah, Carrie, do you have anything you'd like to share about what the past couple of years have been like in the US, and also anybody else who happens to be here from the US or wants to share their experiences from elsewhere?
Yeah. I mean, certainly from my point of view, it's tech companies trying to deliver shareholder value over good products. And when you lay off however much percent, many people on a team, it's often design, research, content folks. I mean, it's pretty wide ranging each time. Those are the people I know at these companies. So every time it's another company, I see more notices saying, "Hey, it's hit me," and I don't know what we can do about that, because it's not because people were doing a poor job that their work doesn't matter. It's the perception. And I also don't think there's anything we can do to protect ourselves. There's not new skills. It's not new ways of talking about it, because someone's just taking a line to the org chart and saying, get rid of this. They're not going, oh, that person, because it's not performance-based. It's not skill-based. It's not experience-based. So, but One, if you're at a smaller company where you can have more influence, one of the things I've really been working on for myself, because it's a bad habit, an old habit of mine that I've been doing for a long time, but working as I work with others and the students that I teach, is mapping all our work to business goals. That the executive doesn't care about the content model. The executive cares what the content model does. The executive doesn't care about the content. It cares about what the content does. So having the redundant, outdated, trivial content is a risk. It is a risk that AI is not going to perform, which means that your customer satisfaction is going to go down, which means churn is going to go up, which means your whatever recurring revenue you're looking at is going to go down. Like we have to keep going back to these business goals and really understand and ask what it is and then connect our work to it. I don't think that's going to save you from a layoff, but if you work at a large tech company, but if that's not where you work, and you have a way to start talking about your work and showing how your work contributes to the bottom line, that will raise its profile, raise the perception of the work you do. You're not just not just writing words in a box. So I think that's something we all can do better, and it will take practice. Lauren Pope created a workbook, handbook last year that she has on her website that anybody can buy for about $40 US, and just helps you frame your work around the business. So I think that is something that we need to be better at. Not just walking around saying we need to do better content, we need to think about the user. It's like, speak the language. Like, that's part of our work. Is we're used to translating the business to the consumer or the customer. Now we need to go the other way too, and not just be one way.
We will dig out that link, Lynette. Lynette's asked for a link to that guide. We'll dig that out for you, Lynette. But yeah, Lauren Pope is fabulous, and she was another newsletter that's worth subscribing to as well. But Lauren, if you can maybe have a look for that and share the link. We also have a speaker actually coming up next month who is extremely relevant to that conversation, which I'll cover in a minute. But we probably have time for one more question. I'm just gonna I might ask Lorian, because I haven't really had a chance to be following the chat closely. Lorian, was there anything from the chat that might be worth bringing up as a sort of a last question or comment? Or if anybody has anything, feel free to put your hand up and ask, while we've got Carrie for a few more minutes.
Yeah, I feel like some of the bigger questions are a whole meetup, and one of them was about how you actually do this, how you actually structure content so it's retrievable and understandable and interpretable. Yeah, I think that's more than a few minutes chat. And as Elle said in the chat, her Sydney content strategy meetup, which is unfortunately only in person in Sydney, she's going to be talking about that with some guests next time. I'm just trying to think if there was any.
Just as a note about that, I'm working on a workshop with UX Content Collective on how to create structured content. Super beginner level, but that's something that you can go to the website now and sign up for the wait list and get notified when it's available. But I expect that probably in May to be ready to deliver.
Brilliant.
Amazing. So yes, we'll drop the link in for that as well. But that's UX Content Collective, which is Patrick Stafford's organisation. They do some a lot of really fabulous training with amazing people like Carrie. So definitely jump in on that one. actually having a chance to, I mean, I know I've done a couple of workshops on this stuff in the past, and actually having a chance to take some real content and look at how you would turn it into a content model is an incredibly clarifying exercise to go through, and there would be nobody better to lead you through that than Carrie. All right.
Just trying to find that link.
Yes, funny you should mention Tori Podmajewski, Larry. She's actually our next speaker. So yeah, really good segue. So
I did not know that.
Yeah, amazing. So I should also actually, I might also call out Larry Swanson. If you're not following Larry, and Larry, do you still have 2 podcasts, or is it?
Well, technically, I had retired the content strategy one, but then Melanie Seibert wrote a book, so I'll drop that episode the next day or 2.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm mostly doing the Knowledge Graph Insights podcast now.
Yeah. Anyway, Larry is just incredibly generous, I think, in sharing conversation that's healing with people in the community, and also his own thoughts. So make sure you're following Larry. So I think, yeah, we're down to about 5 minutes left, so I might jump into some announcements with deep thanks to Carrie for her generosity and her presence today. I did have questions also that I didn't get to, but we'll have to have you back again sooner than 5 years' time, Carrie, because it's been really fabulous to talk to you. I'd also say if you ever have a chance to go to IA conference, you'll be able to meet Carrie in person, and you'll also have a fabulous time. So again, and I know we've had some announcements from Elle about her meetup in Sydney coming up. Any other announcements you'd like to make, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll, if Lorraine, if you can just keep an eye out, we'll make sure we cover them by the end. A couple of announcements from us. So as we've already revealed, our next meetup, which has only just been confirmed, is going to be with Tori Podmajewski. And Tori is also a previous guest of the meetup. She's just co-authored a new book around using content skills for business impact. So very much following on from the point that Carrie was making about the importance of tying content goals to business goals. So she'll be with us on Wednesday, the 22nd of April. It's a little bit earlier than our usual date, but that's the one that worked for her, and we thought, it was too good an opportunity to pass up. So that will be absolutely fantastic. Really, just keep an eye out for the announcement of that, which will be out shortly.
It's worth saying for our American friends here that will be the 21st for them. So it's morning.
That's right. That's right. 22nd Australian time. Yeah. We do have a YouTube channel where we put all our past talks, mostly complete, but today's is obviously going to be an incomplete one. Sorry about that. But yeah, check out. We've now got a nice library of past talks there. So make sure you like and subscribe. As many of you know, at Weave, we are privileged to run the Content Design London's content design training in Australia. And we are just putting together the final sort of touches to our training program for 2026. Apologies that it's taken a while. We're just finalising some things with CDL, who've actually revised all of their courses, partly to include AI as a factor, so that they're really up to date. So we will be making some announcements about that soon. You can sign up for a training updates email at our website, and you'll be the first to know when we actually release course dates. But the 2 first cabs off the rank this year will be the brand new course on working with Gen AI, which I think I can say will be a very, very grounded course on using Gen AI. It won't be yes, let's just use AI for everything. It will be, here are the things that AI might be useful for, here are the things that might be less useful for, or that you might need to put some guardrails in place around, and here's a framework for helping you to make those decisions and have those conversations in your organisation. So we think it's going to be a really fantastic course with CDL's kind of quite unique spin on AI. And then also the classic content design fundamentals course, the revised version of that, will also be announcing hopefully soon. That's all our announcements. Do we have anything in the chat?
From Holly, excuse me, about the Auckland Content Strategy Meetup in New Zealand. So if anyone would like to come and speak or attend there, Holly Is that in person only, or is that online as well? Maybe just pop that in the chat.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can.
It could be an online one. We have been only doing in person, but there's a lot of international people, so definitely keen to have just online. We could actually just put on the screen while we have a bunch of people in the room as well. So yeah.
Essentially hybrid. Great, thanks.
Yeah, hybrid these days than it was. So yeah. Thanks.
And Larry, do you have something to announce?
Yeah, I've got one other thing I'm working on. I've been working with Cruz Saunders and Rahel Bailey and a bunch of other amazing people in the content world on a group called the Kinetic Council. And it's an effort to create like an umbrella organization, it's sort of a professional association around not just content, but adjacent semantic and data practices as well. And I dropped the link in earlier. I'll drop it in the chat again, but we always welcome new people. We're currently, one of the things that we're working on right now is a kind of a knowledge graph project to disambiguate and better articulate and align titles, roles, all this crazy language stuff that Carrie talked about earlier. So wish us luck, and if you want to help, please join us.
Sounds fantastic. Yeah, definitely, Chris. Yeah, so Chris and Rahel are also two of our favourite people and legends in especially the structured content world. So fantastic. Thanks for that, Larry. So we're pretty much out of time. So we'll wrap it up here and let everyone get on with their day. But again, thank you very much for being here. And those of you who are newcomers, hope you enjoyed the session. Keep in touch, and we will see you next month.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks again, Carrie.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thanks again to Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie. Thanks, Carrie.